the NPA's Investigative Directorate intends to appeal the Nulane fraud and corruption judgment. Last month, the Free State High Court in Bloemfontein acquitted former Free State Department of Agriculture official Dr. Limakatso Moorosi and 5 co-accused who had applied to be discharged. The case relates to the almost 25 million rand paid by the Free State Department of Agriculture to Nulane Investments between 2011 and 2012. The money was purportedly paid for a feasibility study of the Free State Province's flagship Mohoma Mobung project. Let's now speak to Raisa Patha, who's a senior investigator at Open Secrets, who joins us live now. Raisa, thank you so much for your time this evening. Your reaction first to the latest development that the ID is now going to be appealing.
I mean, I'm very fascinated to see what the basis of the ID's appeal is, because I think that's a very key part that is missing from the NPA statement, which was released today. We know that the judgment at the Bloemfontein High Court had very scathing remarks to say about the NPA. And it's interesting that this is their response, is to lodge an appeal. So I think next week there will be a press briefing from the NPA on these developments, and hopefully that will outline more clearly what the basis of the appeal is.
And it's going to be interesting, as you say, I mean, when we look at what is going to happen next week, particularly when you think about the fact that, you know, the judge, for example, talking about how shoddy this investigation was at some point, and even saying that, you know, the audacious manner in which this matter was investigated is truly to be lamented. These are strong words, and they say that in their statement that they are taking to heart. And of course, maybe they will be able to clarify. But what does this mean when it comes to someone who's watching these developments, especially post the Zondo Commission's installments of the reports, and wondering whether or not those who were mentioned in those reports will actually be brought to justice, or some of the cases that we've seen?
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the devastating things to come out of the Nulane judgment, and you know, those scathing remarks about the NPA. I think, you know, potentially this could be damaging for public trust in the NPA and public belief that those who were perpetrators of state capture will be prosecuted. And I think, you know, at the heart of the judge's statement is that we have an NPA potentially that lacks the competency to prosecute these cases. And what we would like to see, I think, is an NPA that has competent prosecutors and that can successfully tackle state capture cases, because ultimately the work of the Zondo Commission may be done, but this may only be the beginning of the work of justice. And certainly it's the NPA's responsibility to ensure that there is justice.
And I'm going to come back to the investigations in just a moment, because they talk about this in their statement. But there's something else when you think about this particular case and what it then triggered as a ripple effect. And a lot of people thought that this might be a step closer towards ensuring that maybe some justice is achieved here. There was a red alert notice that then got triggered by this very case. And when you think about now where we are with, you know, that Gupta extradition matter, are you confident that given these particular developments and looking at the fact that government was saying that they want to appeal this particular extradition matter, that if they look at what has happened here and looking at this, you know, the appeal, could we get the Guptas back into the country to account if things turn out this way?
I mean, I think that there are a variety of factors that are involved in terms of the Gupta extradition process. Certainly, it would have been a key thing for the NPA to have gotten the Gupta leaks evidence admitted into court, which unfortunately they failed to do. But also we have to remember that the UAE, which sort of denied the extradition application, itself doesn't have an independent judiciary. And it appears that on both sides, both within the UAE and both in the South African state, there were mistakes made. And certainly it wasn't procedurally, it seems, a fair process as it should have been. And so in that instance, you know, it's certainly complicated, but this is also why we need competent people involved in this process. And certainly, you know, in terms of confidence, you know, the NPA needs to rebuild public confidence. And the statement that they released today, one of the key things that I think is very noticeable is that they seem to shirk responsibility for what happened at the Nulane trial. You know, they sort of say that, oh, it was the mistake of the past, you know, past mistakes, the ID led to this judgment. They say that, it's sort of because the ID isn't formalized, that this is why we are in the situation we find ourselves. But I think what would draw public confidence is if the NPA said, listen, we really messed up and we want to make it better and we want to do better next time. Unfortunately, they're just not saying it. They're not taking the responsibility they need to take.
And especially because a number of people are watching this and have been talking about how slow the wheels of justice appear to be turning in some of these state capture cases. Now, coming to that point, which I was going to get to when, during the investigations, it's something you've just touched on. I mean, the ID, we heard even, when the president was speaking earlier this year in Parliament, saying that it is going to be, made a bit more permanent, and they're going to ensure that it becomes, just a permanent body. And this is something that they talk about in the statement, saying that it now demonstrates the urgency that, is now needed for the ID to then be permanent. But then they critically say that this is going to be an entity with the requisite investigative powers and expanded partnerships. These are going to be at the heart of their work, because when we look at what has been happening with the NPA, I'm sure you'll agree that some of the complex matters have left a lot to be desired in how they've been handled.
Yes, and I think, it's an interesting point, this idea of the formalization of the ID. In my opinion, it would be great to have a formalized structure to deal with state capture cases and other important crimes. But at the same time, we need to ensure that that structure is able to do its job with competence, with efficiency. And it doesn't appear, based on the Nulane case, that the ID has operated with a level of efficiency and competence. And if the ID is to be formalized, the NPA's priority should be to hire and recruit prosecutors who can handle these matters. Because unless we do have people within the NPA who can handle these matters, then these cases will basically end up as Nulane did. There will be judgments, there will be dismissals that leave people, perpetrators of state capture crimes, free to walk, essentially. And we don't want to be in that situation. So we need the NPA to rebuild itself into a structure that we can trust. And we mustn't forget that the NPA itself was deeply affected during the state capture years. Many credible and great prosecutors left the NPA during those years because of what was transpiring at the time. And now is the time to sort of say, we're trying to do better, we want better prosecutors, and we want to get back to where we were as a credible agency.
Now, very briefly, then we're out of time. So is this, just on that point, it's going to now be a difficulty, in your view, to then attract this requisite skill, given the politicization that we've seen in the NPA? Or is there something else at play here now? Because, they've been telling us that they're rebuilding this institution.
Yes, I would be very careful about alluding to any kind of political interference within the NPA right now. There's evidence of that. And I think what we are seeing, unfortunately, is, as the judge said, we're seeing ineptitude, we're seeing lackadaisical manner of handling investigations, and failing to meet the barest threshold to prosecute a case successfully. That's included in the Bloemfontein High Court judgment, and I think that accurately reflects the reality that we're in. And I completely respect that it might be difficult to hire competent prosecutors, but the NPA needs to equip itself with the knowledge on how to recruit people and how to attract those prosecutors through its doors again. It needs to do that, and it's the responsibility of the NPA management to ensure that that work is done.
Raisa, let's see then what comes out next week, and if you and I can speak again and see if some of the reasons that are given for this particular appeal could then be reasons that could put them on a strong footing, or is it basically something that could put them back to square one. But let me thank you for your time this evening. Do appreciate it. That is Raisa Path, Senior Investigator at Open Secrets.